Hi all. For this chapter, what I want you to do at the end is just to write me a couple of paragraphs, 3 paragraphs, a whole story. It's up to you. That begins with the sentence, "Another secret entrance." Chapter 25. Here we go.
"It don't make sense," Clarissa said. "Where did they go?"
She plucked the candle from its stand and waved the light behind one of the church pews, as if she might find the golden-eyed man and his companions hiding there. Out of ideas, she glared angrily at Wild Boy.
"They're getting away," she said. "You must have seen something."
Wild Boy had seen plenty. As he'd watched the men in the graveyard, his eyes had sought out clues on shirt cuffs, trouser knees and shoe heels. 3 of them had served in the army and 1 had been in the navy. All of them had walked through a stone tunnel that day. 3 had played billiards and the golden-eyed man had won, but none of that explained where they had gone. They had locked the church door, lit a candle and then disappeared.
"Anyway," Clarissa said, "this proves the golden-eyed man is the killer. The hooded man disappeared and all, remember, in that alley."
Wild Boy ignored her, trying to think. There was another door to the side of the altar, but it was bolted from inside. And besides, why would the men have come through the front door just to leave by the back? He remembered the noises, the rattling chains and scraping stone. Clarissa muttered something else, but her voice faded into a drone as he turned slowly around. He didn't know what he was looking for, only that he'd realise when he saw it. Suddenly, his eyes were moving with incredible speed, shooting around the church. He saw a tear in a tapestry, a crack in a stone memorial, the worn-down face of a wooden cherub, and Clarissa's candle. "Don't move," he said. Clarissa froze.
"What? What is it?"
"The flame's flicking."
"Is that all?"
she said, relieved.
"Course it is. The window's broken."
"Nah, it's flicking the other way." Clarissa considered the light curiously. Wild Boy was right. The flame was rippling gently towards the window. The draught was coming from the other direction. Wild Boy rushed up the aisle. His senses were now on high alert, his mind working faster than ever. He rolled up his coat sleeve and held his forearm close to the candle. The long hair on his wrist swayed in a breeze from below. They fluttered harder as he held his arm near the base of the stone altar. "Something's under there," he said.
"Another secret entrance," said Clarissa. "We got 'em now."
She stepped back and examined the altar, prodded one side, kicked another impatiently.
"There must be a latch or a layer."
"The cross," Wild Boy said.
"What about it?"
"Why is it so shiny? It should be covered in rust like them candlesticks. It's been used for something." His big eyes sparkled with excitement as they roved around the gleaming bronze ornament, spotting faint finger smudges on the shaft. He gripped it and tried to lift it from the altar, but it seemed to be fastened to the surface. He yanked harder, and this time the cross tilted on a hinge in its base, triggering some sort of catch. At first, nothing happened. Then, gently, the altar began to tremble. Then it shook harder. Behind them, the church pews clattered together. The last shards of glass fell from the windows and shattered to the stone floor. Wild Boy stepped back as the altar scraped to the side, revealing a dark hole in the ground. Clarissa lowered her candle. Its light spilled down a stone ramp that led underground.
"Wild Boy," she said, "that's amazing."
He turned and looked at her. No one had ever spoken to him like that before. Again he felt a glow of pride, but this time he felt guilty too. Clarissa thought they were after the killer, but now, more and more, Wild Boy wanted the machine. "Come on," he said. They crept down the ramp until they reached a vaulted tunnel deep beneath the church. Coffins lay on stones, shelves up and down the dry walls. A broken passage through some cobwebs showed where the golden-eyed man and his companions had passed. Ahead, the dim glow of their lantern lit the spider's silk an eerie orange. Dust sprinkled from the tunnel roof as the secret entrance began to scrape shut. Wild Boy looked up the ramp, watching the rectangle of moonlight at the top get smaller as the altar slid across the gap. Then, Just before it sealed, something moved through the light. Cold fear ran down Wild Boy's spine. What had he seen? It could have been a shadow from the church, or a crow again, or had someone else just come into the tunnel? Clarissa's candle fizzled out, leaving the passage completely dark.
Great, she said. How are we going to catch the killer if we can't even see him? Wild Boy, where are you?
Reaching through the dark, Wild Boy took her hand and placed it on his arm. He didn't want to scare Clarissa by telling her what he'd seen behind them. There was enough to worry about with the golden-eyed man and his companions up ahead. But if there was someone else in the tunnel, they needed to get away fast. Come on, he said. We got to follow that crate.
You mean the killer?
Yeah, the killer. They huddled closer and crept through the cobweb passage. For several minutes, the only sound was their feet splashing in puddles that dotted the rough stone floor. They could still just see the golden-eyed man's light up ahead, but Wild Boy kept glancing back too. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being followed. The tunnel grew colder, and so narrow that they could reach out and touch both walls. Wild Boy heard a rattle of carriages, like distant thunder on a street somewhere above. Water dripped from the ceiling, and broken chunks of stone littered the ground. Clarissa's hand tightened on Wild Boy's arm.
I know what we should do,
she whispered. Aye?
After we catch the killer, I know what we should do. We should be partners. We could find anything, you and me. Crooks, lost dogs, people would pay us a fortune. But I'll look after the money.
Wild Boy stopped. For a second he forgot all about the men ahead and the danger behind. Partners? He said.
Yeah.
Suddenly Clarissa sounded less certain.
I mean, if you wanted, but fine if you don't. I don't care neither way. In fact, forget it, will you?
No, Wild Boy said. He was too stumped to speak. For so long he'd thought the only life he could ever have was alone and in a freak show. But now, maybe, there was another choice. Just then he heard something splash in a puddle behind him. He turned and stared into the darkness. His heart began to beat harder, pounding against his rib cage. We got to go faster, he breathed. Side by side, silent, they kept going. The path began to climb again. Ahead, they saw another light in the tunnel, but it wasn't the golden-eyed man's lantern. As they crept closer, it began to take shape. A door, Clarissa said. They must have gone through. This was the end of the tunnel. An iron slab set in the rough stone wall. Wild Boy couldn't see a handle or lock, just a tiny curling crack, no bigger than the curve of a penny, right in the centre of the door.
There's no keyhole nowhere, Clarissa said. I can't open it.
Wild Boy ran a finger over the crack, studying it curiously. There were tiny scratches around the edges, as if something metal had knocked against it. I think this might be the keyhole, he said.
Don't look like none I've ever seen.
Nah, it looks like a letter. He brought out Dr. Griffin's ring and ran a fingertip over its raised letter G. Was it possible? Clarissa turned, staring down the tunnel.
What was that?
She hissed. Ah,
I heard something behind us.
There it was again. Footsteps splashing closer. A dark shape cut through the cobwebs.
Wild Boy,
Clarissa said.
It's him, the hooded man.
Throw them rocks.
What?
Slow him down. Clarissa grabbed a rock from the ground and hurled it into the dark, then another and another.
He's still coming.
Wild Boy didn't look back. He had to concentrate. He hoped he'd got this right. He slid the ring over his finger and pressed it against the crack in the door. The raised letter G slotted perfectly into the thin groove. It fits, he said.
Open it then.
Behind the footsteps quickened into a run. Wild Boy turned the ring. Immediately the iron door began to tremble. He heard the whir of cogs turning inside and then the clunk, thunk of a lock sliding. Got it, he cried. He shoved the door open and they tumbled through. Just as they slammed it shut again, something thumped against its other side. Wild Boy and Clarissa heaved against the iron slab, struggling to keep it closed. But slowly the door began to open. Push!
I am pushing.
A gloved hand reached through and grasped Clarissa's hair. She screamed, and Wild Boy leaped up and beat hard into the hand's thumb. It shot back, but the door opened wider. Wild Boy looked over his shoulder, searching for anything to use as a weapon. He saw a torch crackling on a wall. "Hold the door!" he cried. Leaving Clarissa, he ran to the wall and snatched the torch from its bracket. Its iron handle scorched the hair on his wrist, but he held on tight as he rushed back to the door. He braced himself to stab the fire at whoever was on the other side. But whoever it was gone. Clarissa finally closed the door and turned her pick in a lock. It's sealed. They leaned against it, their breaths coming in rapid gasps.
That was him, Clarissa said. That must have been the hooded man, but the golden-eyed man was ahead of us.
Wild Boy nodded, still struggling to breathe.
That means he's not the killer. So who is?
She took the torch and raised it against the dark.
And where are we now?
Okay, so a little short story, please, that begins with another secret entrance. Thank you.